All right then, so the title of tonight's talk is a question, a long question. Who was the woman in the EPHAH and the two women with stork's wings that took the EPHAH to the land of Shinar, which is recorded in Zechariah chapter 5, verse 5 to 11, which was the seventh vision that the prophet received at the time. I'm going to start in verse 5 of that chapter, of Zechariah chapter 5, where we read, "Then the angel who talked with me went forth and said to me." This angel went forth. Most say the angel came forward. The implication being that after the preceding vision, the angel withdrew for a while, maybe to give Zechariah time to meditate on the preceding vision, which involved a flying scroll. And so the angel then comes forward again and directs Zechariah's attention to another vision. And he said, "Lift up your eyes." After each vision, you'll notice he's told to lift up his eyes to see the next vision. And this indicates that he was awake during the time of these visions, and he must have turned his eyes downward to an ordinary level after seeing each vision. And he didn't just keep looking up. And he's told to lift up your eyes and to see what is going forth. Now, in the preceding vision, as I mentioned, he saw a flying scroll going forth, and now he sees something else going forth, namely an ephah. And I said, verse 6, I'm reading, I said, "What is it? What is it?" And the angel said, "This is an ephah that goes forth." And as we'll see, it was carried by these two women with stork's wings, and they took it to the land of Shinar. Now, an ephah was an ordinary common measure used for grain by the Jews. It was a Jewish measure. It's referred to about 30 times in the Old Testament. Opinions differ regarding the size. Some range from 19 to 30 litres, that is 8 to 10 gallons. But the ephah in this vision must have been much larger and a different shape, I would say, because a woman was inside it, causing Zechariah to say, "What is it?" He didn't immediately think that it was an ephah, and I'll say because of its size and its shape. The normal Jewish ephah was not big enough for a woman to be inside it. The one in the vision was probably about the size of a barrel. Being a common Hebrew Jewish measure would indicate that the woman inside it was a Jew and represented the Jews. The vision, therefore, must concern the Jewish nation, as indeed all of Zechariah's visions do, and that's not uncommon in the prophetic scriptures. The ephah also had a lead cover, that is, a lead lid, designed to keep the woman inside and to stop her from escaping. She was locked. She was locked inside this ephah. She was, as it were, imprisoned in it. Regarding the ephah, the angel says in verse 6, this is their, that is the Jews, this is their resemblance through all the earth. Now, the Hebrew word translated earth is often translated land, and it can refer either to the whole earth or it can refer to the land of Israel. I notice a lot of the modern translations don't translate it earth, they translate it land, which is more appropriate because we're dealing here with the land of Israel. No question about that. According to Strong, the Hebrew word translated resemblance means an eye. It's actually translated eye or eyes many times in the Old Testament. So the ephah represents that upon which all the Jews in the land have their eyes fixed or fastened or focused upon. She is imprisoned in this ephah because it has captured her attention. It has captured her thoughts and desires, causing her to be imprisoned by it as a result. In other words, her heart is set on it. She is bound by it. Now, the question is, does that make sense? Well, yes, I think it does, because the ephah was a measure used for buying and selling grain. It signified commerce. It signified commercial activity. It signified business. It signified making money and profiteering. It was a symbol of trade and commerce. Having their eyes fixed on this and being captured by it signifies the Jews were preoccupied. They were obsessed with making money. Lovers of money more than lovers of God. They were enslaved by money instead of God. You know, in Matthew 5 verse 15, Jesus relates to this sort of thing in a kind of parable where he says, don't put the light under a bushel. Now, a bushel was a measure like the ephah, used for buying and selling, for doing business, for making money. And what Jesus was virtually saying was, don't allow the bushel to snuff out your faith. That is, don't allow the desire and the quest for money cause you to hide the light and not be open and transparent about your true Christian identity and commitment. The word measure, which the ephah was, can stand for something which has come to the full, something that has reached its limit. In Zechariah, it is defined as wickedness. We'll talk more about that shortly, which involved the sin of covetousness and greed, which had reached its maximum limit at the time that this prophecy relates. In Luke 6 verse 38, reference is made to a good measure in a commercial transaction being full. The word full is used, pressed down, shaken together, and flowing over. Jesus gave this a spiritual application when he said to the corrupt religious Jews who were covetous, who were lovers of money, he said, fill up the measure of your father's sins. Matthew chapter 23. The measure here signifying the container of sins. In 1 Thessalonians 2 verse 16, Paul refers to false teachers who will, quote, fill up their sins. In Genesis 15 verse 16, the point is made that Israel will not be released from Egypt to go to possess the land of the Amorites until the iniquity, the sins of the Amorites is full. Same word again. And in Daniel 8 verse 23 says, it would not be until the transgressors in a certain nation are come to the full that another king will conquer and gain victory. So these scriptures teach that the sins of a nation has to reach a certain level, has to reach a certain limit before judgment falls, and it's likened to filling up a vessel. The woman in the vessel called ephah represents the Jewish nation, as I've said. Obviously in a wicked state, because that word wickedness is there to define it, because she is called wickedness. She obviously fills the vessel because her wickedness has clearly reached the level or the limit where judgment is executed, involving exile, involving being taken away out of the land of Israel into the land of Shinar. So that's another way of looking at the ephah. Instead of saying this is their resemblance, as the Authorized Version does, the Revised Version, the Septuagint, Jerusalem Bible, Rotherham and others, they say this is their iniquity. This is their iniquity. That is, it is saying the ephah represented their iniquity. And that is a good translation. This, of course, is arrived at by a change of one letter in the Masoretic text on which the King James Bible is based. However, it results in exactly the same conclusion already drawn, namely, the ephah represented being bound by business, buying and selling, profiteering, making money, or more to the point, the love of money, which we know is the root of all evil. Their desire was to get rich and to love money more than God, which is defined as wickedness. And the Apostle Paul talks particularly about this, the love of money and the problems it can create in 1 Timothy chapter 6. And he says it actually can result in departing from the faith. And that really is what this section in Zechariah is all about. It's about the Jewish community losing their faith, giving up on God because of their love for money, symbolised by the ephah. Verse 7 of that chapter says, "And behold, the leaden cover was lifted, and there was a woman sitting in the ephah." Most translations agree with this sense. We learn from this that the ephah had a lid. It had a cover on it, and it was lifted. The King James Bible says the lid weighed a talent. Now, a talent weighed between 34 or 35 and 45 kilograms. That's between 75 and 100 pounds. Lead, of course, is a heavy metal, and it is used in Scripture to signify that, signify something heavy. For example, Exodus 15 verse 10 refers to the Egyptians sinking like lead into the Red Sea. Reference to the lid of the ephah being lead and the woman only being able to get out if the Lord lifted it does signify she was trapped, no question, confined, bound by the Lord. This could signify, firstly, her desire to make money has completely captured her. Totally addicted, she is represented as doing, enslaved and imprisoned by the lust for riches and the desire for wealth. And secondly, as a result of love for money more than God, the Lord allows, or the Lord causes her to be taken away, to be exiled, and won't allow her to escape and avoid being exiled. The heavy lead lid, which the woman couldn't remove to escape from being exiled, represents the Lord's heavy hand and control, preventing her from escaping and avoiding exile. The Lord only lifted the lid, I believe, to show Zechariah what was inside, but very quickly put it back because the woman tried to get out, knowing or sensing she's going to be taken away out of the land into exile. Now, the context throughout this whole vision demands that the woman is from the land of Israel and represents the Jewish nation. I need to emphasize that because many commentators who get away from that end up all over the place. It's not uncommon for Scripture to refer to Israel, the Old Testament church, in the feminine gender as a woman. I've got scriptures here. I won't quote them because they're easy to find. Israel was the Lord's bride or wife in the same spiritual sense that the New Testament church, the true Israel of God, is Christ's virgin bride and prospective wife. But Israel became alienated. She became estranged from God through her wickedness and had to be put away as by a jealous, angry husband. The same thing happened to Christ's church. It became apostate and is referred to not as a pure and holy woman, but a harlot, an abomination that will incur judgment, as we read in the book of Revelation. Reading on into verse 8, the angel said, "This," that is the woman, "is wickedness." She is wickedness. She is the embodiment. She's the manifestation of wickedness, the nature of which, signified by the ephah, I've already explained. And it says he cast it into the midst of the EPHAH, which most of the modern translations give a better rendering, and they say he thrust her back into the EPHAH. The implication is she made an attempt to escape, knowing she was going to be taken away into exile. And so in verse 9, Zechariah says, Then I lifted up my eyes, just like he did in verse 1 and in verse 5 in relation to the flying scroll. He must have looked down after he saw the woman push back down into the EPHAH and the lid put back on. But there's more to come. There's more to this vision. So he has to lift his eyes again to see this continuing vision. And he saw two women. Two women appeared. Not angels, not men, women. And the wind was in their wings. They had wings. And reference to the wind being in their wings indicates the wings were not hanging down, but in flight position, ready to fly away. The Hebrew word for wind is ruach, elsewhere translated spirit, referring to God's power, implying they were sent and commissioned by God to take the woman in the EPHAH away out of the land. Now, there's a similar event referred to in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 11 to 13, and also Jeremiah 51, verse 1 to 2, where the wind symbolises a force sent by God to remove the Jews, and it refers to the Babylonians, which we know took place. Also remember, the Babylonians who removed the Jews from their land are referred to as God's servant in some places, because it was God's will for them to take the Jews into exile. The Medes, who were pagans, they're actually referred to as the Lord's sanctified ones in Isaiah. They were sent by God. They were appointed by God. Cyrus the Persian, he was a pagan, and he's referred to as being anointed, God's anointed, because he likewise was appointed by God to release the Jews from Babylon. So the wind and the wings of those who take the woman into exile, I believe, represents a divine commission executed by a nation appointed by God. They had wings like the wings of a stork, it says. So they had the body and the attire of a woman, but wings that looked like stork's wings. Each item in this vision is clearly symbolic, so it is a challenge to discern the meaning. Some commentators say it's impossible to know, which makes it all the more challenging. Storks, as you probably know, have got long, wide wings, and they have great strength in flight. There are only 5 references to the stork in the Bible. Leviticus 11 verse 19 and Deuteronomy 14 verse 18 refers to the stork as being an unclean bird, not fit for human consumption by Israel. Psalm 104 verse 17 refers to the stork nesting up in the high fir trees. And Jeremiah 8 verse 7 says the stork, quote, knows her appointed times, that is, to migrate. The stork is a migratory bird. They travel thousands of kilometres from breeding grounds to find food. They migrate from Europe to Africa and from Africa to Europe. And Israel and Iraq, the land of Shinar, are part of the migration corridor where they stop. Their nests are often seen up on electricity pylons. So then, the 2 women with stork's wings, along with their uncleanness to a Jew, their strength of flight, and their migratory nature and ability, symbolises the power that God's Spirit is going to use to carry his wicked people away from their land captive into exile. This symbolism is reminiscent of a similar symbolism in Ezekiel chapter 17, verse 1 to 4, which refers to the Babylonians as, quote, a large eagle with huge wings who came and carried Jewish captives away out of their land. Very similar situation to what we're reading in Zechariah. The eagle also, of course, was an unclean bird to the Jews. The fact that the stork was an unclean bird to the Jews indicates it would not represent the Jews, but Gentiles, a Gentile power regarded as unclean by the Jews. And the same applies, as I mentioned, to the eagle in Ezekiel chapter 17. This is also indicated by the fact that storks are not indigenous to Israel. That is, they're not natural inhabitants. They don't live in the land of Israel. They pass through the land of Israel as they migrate, and they take what they can get. So, if the woman with stork's wings are Gentiles, who are they? Where are they from? If we knew where they're going, that would surely be a clue. And the fact that verse 10 to 11 says they take the woman in the EPHAH, that is the Jews, to the land of Shinar, surely implies a connection with that land. Now, the land of Shinar was Babylonia, where the Jews were taken captive into exile for 70 years prior to Zechariah getting this vision. The Babylonians took them there because it was their land. But Babylon was conquered by the Medes and the Persians, as we know, and the Jews were never taken away captive to that land again. However, the land of Shinar is southern Iraq today, a Muslim country, which suggests a connection with the two women, because Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11 to 12 tells us that when Jesus returns, he will regather Jews back to their land from Shinar, where they have been outcasts, cast out. That is, cast out of their own land, which we see happening in this vision that Zechariah got. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to put two and two together here. The inference to be drawn is that the two women who take Jews captive to Shinar, to Iraq, must be Muslims. And in the end time, prior to the second coming, they will take Jews captive into Muslim countries. Now, Isaiah 11 verse 12 doesn't only refer to Jews being regathered from Shinar, but also Assyria, which was northern Iraq. Also mentions Jews being regathered from Egypt, Iran, and Syria, which also are Muslim countries. This clearly has not been fulfilled yet. If you look at the context of Isaiah 11, it is definitely second coming period. Today, there's only a handful of Jews living in Iraq and those other Muslim countries. In the year 2019, the United States State Department estimated there were fewer than 6 adult members of the Jewish community living in Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. Some reports from the year 2021 stated there were only 4 Jews left in the city. There may be none now. Wouldn't surprise me. Originally, the Jewish community numbered over 135,000, but was reduced due to immigration and other factors such as state-sponsored persecution and violence, legal discrimination and hostility caused by the establishment of the state of Israel. Once Israel established her state, well then she just fell out of favour with all the surrounding Muslim countries, and they took it out on their resident Jews. A history of anti-Semitic discrimination and violence by the Muslim Iraqi government led to a mass exodus of Jews to the land of Israel. But Bible prophecy indicates the Muslim nations are going to gain a temporary victory over Israel in the end time, resulting in Jews being taken captive and taken into exile into foreign lands. Joel chapter 3, for example, refers to the enemy dividing the land of Israel among themselves and selling Jews to the Gentiles, scattering them into foreign countries. Verse 3 refers to them throwing dice to decide who will get the Jewish captives and selling Jewish boys and girls into slavery to pay for prostitutes and wine. Jesus referred to this period as the Great Tribulation, a time of trouble such as has never been since the beginning of the world, that is, in the whole of human history. Now that's quite a statement when you consider what happened during the Holocaust. But in view of the diabolical savagery and the lust to kill Jews, which was recently displayed by the Muslim Palestinians, it's not difficult to imagine what would happen if Muslims conquered Israel. Fortunately, it will be temporary because divine intervention will stop the slaughter. If not, Jesus said no flesh would survive. But the question is, why? Why would the Muslims be represented by two women carrying the ephah? And why two? Why two women? The answer is because religious powers in biblical times and biblical prophecies are depicted as women. And the Muslim religion has got two branches. It's not just one, there are two branches in the Muslim religion, the Sunni and the Shia, and both are in Iraq. They are both established in Iraq. Now, normally, these two divisions of the Muslim religion, normally they are divided. Normally they are at loggerheads. But in this vision that Zechariah got, he sees them united. And what has united them? The ephah with the Jews inside. The Jews have united the Muslims. It's the only thing that can unite them. And they're united in what? In getting the Jews out of their land. And that's what is happening. These two women are taking the ephah out of the land of Israel and taking it into a Muslim land. And that is exactly what the Muslims want to do. That is their ambition, to get the Jews out of the land. And that is what the symbolical picture is really presenting here. Otherwise, why not have two men? Two men carrying the ephah. Why not two angels carrying the ephah away? Now, I realise that some people say, oh, that's a bit far-fetched, Barry. That's a bit of a long shot, saying that these two women represented the twofold division of the Muslim religion. Really? Well, did you know that the nation of Israel, a religious nation, she was divided into two. She had the northern kingdom and she had the southern kingdom. And did you know that there's a scripture that actually refers to them as two women? Yeah, they're referred to as two women, as Aholah and Aholibah. And that is referring to the Jewish, the divided Jewish nation. So you see, it's already been presented as a symbolical picture. So there's nothing far-fetched at all about seeing the Muslim religion, which is divided, as being represented by two women as well. Now this all ties in with Revelation 12, which refers to a dragon with 10 horns attacking a woman with a crown of 12 stars and casting down a third of the stars prior to the kingdom of Christ. The dragon, which is a crocodile, it represents Egypt. Ezekiel chapter 29 clearly teaches that. And the woman with the 12 stars clearly represents Israel, which you can see in Genesis 37, verse 9 to 10, and Daniel chapter 8, verse 10 and verse 24. Being an end-time prophecy, Egypt is a Muslim nation, and the 10 horns undoubtedly represent a confederacy of anti-Israel Muslim nations. Now, Revelation 12 reveals that this anti-Israel Muslim confederacy will prevail over Israel for a 3.5-year period. And other prophecies reveal that the Jews will be driven into exile. Ezekiel chapter 39, which is the sequel to chapter 38, which talks about a massive invasion of Israel. Ezekiel 39 verse 23 to 24 and verse 27 to 28 clearly refers to the Jews going into exile during that particular period, which is the end time period. Joel 3, chapter 3 that I've already referred to, refers to Egypt being violent towards Israel. This is end-time prophecy. It refers to Egypt being violent towards Israel and of Jews going into captivity in that end-time period. So it's not difficult at all to see how Jews could end up being exiled to a Muslim country like Iraq, known as Shinar in biblical times. But not only Iraq, other Muslim nations as well, as we've seen in Isaiah 11, verse 11, they will be included. Now, coming back into Zechariah chapter 5, verse 10, Zechariah said to the angel that talked with him, "Where are they taking the ephah?" He saw these 2 women with stork's wings taking off probably with the ephah. And he said, where are they taking the ephah? It's interesting, Zechariah didn't ask what the ephah represented. He didn't ask what the woman in the ephah represented. He didn't ask what the 2 women with stork's wings represented. Didn't ask. All he asked was, did he know their significance? That's the question. Did he know? He only seemed to be interested in the destination of the ephah. Strange that, in a way, which in a way you could understand if he knew that the woman in it represented the Jews. He'd want to know where they're going, where are they being taken. And the angel answered in verse 11, to build a house for it in the land of Shinar. Incidentally, the land of Shinar, I've been referring to it as Babylonia, and that is supported in Scripture. I got all the quotes here. I don't want to really go through them. You can find them yourself if you doubt it. But there is no question about it. The land of Shinar is definitely Babylonia. And he says they're taking the ephah to build a house for it in the land of Shinar. Now a house is somewhere to stay, not to visit. And what it's saying here is the land of Israel is going to cease to be their house. It's going to cease to be their home. They're going to Shinar not for a holiday, not for just for a few days or a few weeks. No, they're going there for some period of time, and there's going to need to be a house. And that's what that word house is sort of signifying to us. Due to the symbolical nature of the vision in Zechariah 5, some have suggested that Shinar may not refer to the literal geographical land designated as Shinar, because sometimes names can be symbolical. For example, due to her immorality and idolatry, Israel is referred to as Sodom and Egypt in Isaiah chapter 1 verse 10 and Revelation 11 verse 8. Rome is referred to as Babylon in 1 Peter 5 verse 13. And the Roman Catholic Church is also referred to as Babylon in Revelation chapter 17. So it is thought by some that Shinar, which is where Babylon was, is just symbolic for any nation or any nations that take Jews captive into exile, as did the Babylonians, rather than it signifying a specific country such as Iraq. Be that as it may, let everyone be persuaded in their own mind. But we cannot avoid the fact that Isaiah 11, verse 11, specifically mentions and singles out Shinar and lists it separately from other nations, such as Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and Syria, which leads me to believe that we regard it as the land of Iraq, which is where Shinar was. Now, this raises the question, if the Jews are going to be exiled into a number of different countries, different Muslim countries, why does Zechariah 5 only mention Shinar? I would say probably because that country was particularly relevant to the Jews in Zechariah's day. I mean, they had recently returned from there after 70 years exile due to wickedness. And so the warning to them in particular is, if you repeat that wickedness, history will repeat itself and you'll end up back in the same place. That's the way I would take it. So, verse 11 says, the EPHAH with the woman is taken to the land of Shinar to build a house for it. These words indicate that Jews exiled there won't be there, as I've said, just for a few days' visit. And Revelation 12, of course, says that the Muslim confederacy that's going to prevail over Israel will be for 3.5 years. So the deportation to Shinar will result in staying there for a time. That is how I understand the reference to the house. And this reminds us of God's words recorded in Jeremiah 29, verse 4 to 5, to the Jews when they were carried away captive to Shinar by the Babylonians. This is what God said to them through the prophet. He said, build houses, plant vineyards, and dwell in the houses. The reason being, of course, because the exile was going to be for quite a few years. Well, the end-time exile referred to in Zechariah chapter 5 won't be lasting that long, of course, but it will last for a few years. And this is conveyed by the angel saying, a house will be built for the EPHAH in Shinar. It doesn't say, as in the case of Jeremiah 29, that the Jewish exiles themselves will build the houses there, which you wouldn't expect in view of the circumstances. No, it says the Lord will build the house, implying the Lord will see to it that the Jews will survive, that they will be established until deliverance arrives. This, in fact, is what is promised in the last statement in the vision in Zechariah 5. This is how it reads. And it, that is the EPHAH with the woman inside, it shall be established and set there upon its own base. That word established means it'll stand firm, won't be pushed over, it won't be removed, it won't be destroyed. This is a picture of an EPHAH, a vessel with a woman inside, exiled but not thrown away, not discarded, never to be seen again, but of it being put on a base, on a support, and being preserved, which calls to mind God's promise to the Jews that though I make a full end of all nations where I scatter you, I will not make a full end of you. The EPHAH sits on a base built by God, prepared by God, ready to be picked up again and taken back to her land. That's how I would understand it. Because the word house is sometimes used in connection with a temple, some have given it that application in Zechariah 5 verse 11. Some have made it apply to spiritual Babylon's cathedral, that is St. Peter's at Rome. And some really go off on a tangent on that particular basis. But the context of Zechariah 5 verse 11, I believe, requires that the woman in the EPHAH represents the Jews, and they are not into building temples in foreign lands. They build synagogues. There's only one temple they've ever built that they're interested in, and that's on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel. There is not, of course, a Jewish temple at Jerusalem at the moment. There has not, in fact, been one there for over 1900 years, since AD 70, when the Romans destroyed it. But, as you know, Bible prophecy teaches that in the end time, prior to the second coming of Jesus, a Jewish temple is going to exist on its site in the land of Israel. Question is, therefore, what is going to cause the Islamic invasion of Israel? You know, during the crisis with the Palestinians in the last few years, it was looking at some stages like some of the Muslim nations were going to gather their forces and come down and deal with Israel. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. And so you say to yourself, well, now, if that didn't cause the Muslim nations to confederate and invade, as the prophecies say they ultimately will, well, what on earth will cause it? I have a personal view. It's not dogmatic, but it's just the way I'm thinking at the moment. I'm thinking that the Jews' removal of the mosque, the Muslim mosque, and the building of their temple in its place could be the catalyst that will cause the invasion. We know that that mosque on the Temple Mount is the second most holy mosque in the whole of the Muslim world. And I can't see them taking it lightly if the Jews remove their mosque and build their temple in its place. And several scenarios are possible. It's possible that as a result of the Jews doing that, it will incite the Muslim world, unite them in order to invade Israel. And of course, in the event of them invading Israel, if Israel has built their temple, they'd destroy it. They're not going to leave it there. They'd destroy it. And even if it's only half built, they would destroy it. They would not want to leave it there, and maybe even attempt to rebuild the mosque on that particular site. But Revelation chapter 12 tells us Michael the archangel, who is the protector prince of Israel, he intervenes and he deals with this Muslim dragon or crocodile. He casts it down from its position of power, and no doubt casts it out. And the result would be that the Muslim threat would be removed. There would be peace in Israel. And in the event of that happening, they would rebuild their temple. What I'm saying is, sometimes we can have very restricted views of things. We think of the Jews building their temple and we think, oh, that's only going to happen once, but not necessarily. Time will tell. It's possible that like I say, the Muslims will destroy their temple, and then when Michael the archangel has dealt with them, they'll just rebuild it again, because it has to be there when the final invasion takes place. There is, we know, a second invasion. Now, in the event of Michael dealing with the Muslim problem, Israel, you could imagine, entering into a period of peace and rest no fear. And Ezekiel chapter 38, which refers to the second invasion, it says that Gog of the land of Magog, prince of Rosh, referring to Russia, it says he has this evil thought about invading Israel, the land, with unwalled villages, no bars, no gates, no defence, because the threat, the Muslim threat, has been removed, and Israel is there just living in peace. And actually, Paul says that when they're saying peace, peace, then comes sudden destruction. And that, I think, could be the way that it would actually work. We know the man of sin, who we believe is Gog of the land of Magog, he has to sit in that temple proclaiming himself to be God. And that is when Jesus comes in flaming fire and destroys him with the brightness of his coming, and sets up his kingdom. We know that the daily sacrifice will be taken away by the invader, and that will be the starting date of the 1260, 1290, 1335 days that Daniel speaks about in Daniel chapter 12. So you see, we are well on our way down the road to Armageddon. These things could never have happened until the Jews returned to their land, which they have. They needed to become a nation again, which they did in 1948. They needed to reoccupy Jerusalem again. Couldn't be building a temple there if they didn't occupy it or own it. They're doing that now. And more than that, there's big talk amongst the Orthodox Jews particularly about building the temple, and they've actually prepared. Rumour has it they've got all the stones in a warehouse ready to just put it up, and they've got the garments for the priests made, and they've got the menorah, the 7-branch lampstand made. Everything is there virtually, and it could happen very, very quickly. I'm hoping it will happen in my time, but time will tell. But like I say, we're very close. We're in the last lap, I believe, of human history, and we are very privileged, very honoured to see as much as we have seen.